And now on Nights with Steve Price from the 50 Up Club, Christopher Zinn.
Yep, Christopher joins us every Thursday night. Good evening to you.
Yes, good evening, Steve, and the listeners.
Yeah, and forget about Mal Brough. The big political story of the week, I have no doubt, and we've had huge reaction, particularly talkback reaction, was this Productivity Commission report broken in The Australian about, again, floating the idea of an assets test. Now, I've written a column about it this week. I've taken calls. I think any government who believes that they can get away with doing this is delusional, Christopher.
And look, I agree with you. And I think if you read the Productivity Commission report, while they might have made certain recommendations, it's clear preference that older Australians want to stay in their house, 73%. Only 2% want to be in a mobile home, or very small numbers in residential aged care. So obviously people really want that. And while it can be said that 15% of those would have no need of the pension if they sold their home, and that would save the government $6 billion. Actually, what is the cost of those pensioners if they sell up? And I think that's a more than valid question.
And the distortion to the real estate market. I mean, this splinters into so many directions when you actually start to do it. I mean, the most obvious question, which I would like to ask, the Treasurer when I eventually get him on, I hope that happens before the end of the year. Older Australians increasingly are having to pay out large amounts of money for aged care. Now, that is to get a place in an aged care facility or a unit in an aged care home, which then ultimately ends up with hospice care. And they use the sale of their house to finance that. Where are you supposed to do that if you suddenly downsize and don't have that equity anymore?
Exactly. And look, there's also, as the Productivity Commission report makes clear, there's an aligned interest. It's actually much cheaper for the government to provide in-home care than it is to fund residential aged care places. And there's 800,000 people who get this in-home care. But of course, you can only do that if you really still have your home. So, you know, as you say, there's a real balance going on. I just would encourage people to look at the report. I'm putting out a newsletter with the 50 Up Club so you can see it in simple sense. But really knowing what others think and do about their housing decisions as older Australians, I think strengthens all of us in terms of what our resolve is what we might care to do. And really, you know, the choice is up to you if you're lucky enough to have your own home.
Unlike most politicians, you have actually gone back and read it. What else did you find?
I found what was really interesting. Well, look, there's about 15% of people aged 65 who are in rented accommodation, and obviously they do have lack of tenure and they have high housing stress through rents, and the government support is inadequate. But it is that, you know, this very rock-solid majority of three-quarters who have their own home, who have no mortgage on it, when asked what circumstances they would use a reverse mortgage or some other financial product to dip into use their home to fund retirement, 38% say not under any circumstances, and then 40% say only for health or medical aged care. So, look, part of the paradox is that people are skimping and saving in old age when actually they could live a much more comfortable retirement by dipping in, not by selling the house, but by some sort of financial product which allows them access to some of what's called their equity in share in it. But unfortunately, those products aren't trusted widely in the market. There aren't many of them, and you know, people aren't really using them. So hopefully there can be development of more trustworthy financial products allowing people actually to spend some of that saving that they have, unless, of course, they want to pass all of it on to their heirs.
I'm always reluctant to suggest government get involved in those sorts of negotiations, but maybe from the trust point of view to get the trust levels up, because I agree with you that one of the answers is reverse mortgage type products, is to have the government run what is almost an aged care HECS scheme. We have our children go off to university, they don't put their hands in their pocket, they finish their degree and then they pay it off. Maybe there is an argument that at the other end of your life, you can draw down on the equity in that house, have it guaranteed by the federal government, use the money to pay for your health care and your quality of life, and then the government, when you pass away or sell your house, they then recoup that equity back from you. It sounds complicated, but that would make more sense than trusting perhaps a reverse mortgage product.
Look, exactly. And look, reverse mortgages are just one of the products. There are others, but they are increasingly complicated, and there have been some scandals and questions in the past about some of these things, and if they don't work rightly, how much debt that you can actually get into. But obviously, it is crazy that someone can be so asset rich and cash poor. And if there's a way that can be trusted to do that, it does say in the report that, more financial services providers will get involved, but the market is too small, and also the risk of reputational damage, which presumably is this thing that if something goes wrong, it can really put egg on their face. So, yeah, look, I agree, it could well be for the government to get some involvement in this, at least to get the ball rolling, and then let private providers compete with the government and keep each other honest.
And I hope that 50 Up Club is standing there ready with the barricades to put them up very smartly if anyone seriously suggests that anyone's going to do this.
Well, look, I mean, they are, think tanks galore are coming up and saying what a great idea and how unfair it is that people don't have to include their home in terms of any pension assets test. I think that the push has already come from that side. But you're right, we have to not only erect the barricades, we actually have to man them and give a decent fight, and a decent fight armed with correct information and evidence. And actually, as I would commend the PC Productivity Commission report, not everyone might agree with all the recommendations, but I think in terms of the research they've done with older Australians of what we do and why we do it is fascinating and going to be very useful ammunition.
Always a pleasure, Christopher Zinn. Thank you, mate. I'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, my pleasure.